Good morning, everyone. Hearing me well? We're very excited to be here. It's a very important conversation about the future of this country. And because we have a short time, 20 minutes, is going to be a very productive panel where we're going to speak frankly and try to get to very concrete solutions. So without any more ado, I'm just going to start. Thank you very much for being all here. Minister Morneau, maybe I will pick up from where Tony just left out. Canada is lagging behind. This is like a bit scary. We all know about it. But what specifically do you think we need to do to catch up?
Well, we certainly agree that one of the biggest challenges we face as a nation is dealing with our lagging productivity between us and other countries. So from our perspective, what we're trying to do is start by setting the groundwork. The very first thing we think we need to start with, and what we have started with, is students. So we recognize that the students of today are the innovators of tomorrow. So we started by reducing the costs of university for them by increasing student grants. But a second thing, and really a basis for our innovation agenda, which I'm hoping others will talk about, is by focusing on research in universities and colleges. So we've started by making a $2 billion commitment to research institutes across the country, to helping universities to gear up by research labs and other sorts of facilities they need to provide the basis, the science basis. And from there, we're going to move towards a more innovative agenda, which I'd like to talk a little bit more about after I let my friends on stage talk.
Thank you. Brenda, you were the former mayor of Waterloo. You're now an entrepreneur yourself. What is your vision of what we need to do and what outcome we should be looking for?
Well, I think that the big thing is being spoken about right now is that we all need to be sitting here together, working together as a country, and Startup Canada is leading the charge on that. And I'm very reassured by the Minister's comments of the importance of recognizing that innovation is going to lead this country forward. I think it's really important that entrepreneurs feel safe and secure in their visions and what they want to do, and that the supports are in place to help them to create jobs, to create innovation, to create technology that's going to add to the resourcefulness of Canada. So we have a lot of work to do, and as the Minister says, we're fallen behind a bit, but we can catch up because Canada is a country of great innovation, great talent, and the world's just waiting for us to get back on the stage.
Jeff, we talk a lot about, and Tony actually mentioned that we are more risk averse in Canada than maybe in some other countries like the US. In fact, a lot of Canadian companies start in the US and then later on come to Canada. And one of the things you mentioned, Tony, as well, is that the VC are kind of shying away from helping the companies that maybe don't succeed at first. And it's not just the VCs, the banks, the financial institutions, and others. So how do we reverse that? How do we actually change that? Is that possible?
Well, I think to the question earlier around how do you get Canadians innovating more, it's funny, I was out with this small business that had started a couple of weeks ago, and their talk track was, well, if we could just figure it out in Canada, then we'll go tackle the US. And it's that little bit of friction there of thinking within our own borders instead of thinking globally, or at least thinking North America, that we need to overcome. And part of that is companies that have been able to go across the borders, lending a hand and providing an example to other companies so that they've got something to look up to and recognize that it can be done. There's also a big role, I think, for industry, for government, and for the education system to teach the core fundamentals of what makes a business great and how to scale and how to grow. And that to me is a core fundamental of what will help small businesses in general across the country grow faster.
All right, thank you. And Tony, how do we more specifically catch up?
Well, I think from my perspective, innovation is really something that has to start with our leaders, our community leaders, our business leaders, really encouraging people to be, all citizens in every walk of life, to be thinking about things in a new way, and encourage people and recognize people that are thinking about new ways to do things. So we have a tendency in this country to go with, you never get fired for hiring IBM. We need to break that culturally at the grassroots level and really recognize Canadians, again, in any walk of life, that are really thinking about new and innovative ways to do things, and our leaders got to support it.
Okay, and the last, actually, part of this is the fact that we're lagging. It's decades of non-investment or not creating that ecosystem that's so important, like we have in Silicon Valley. You mentioned Israel, there's Shenzhen and others. So how can we create a unique Canadian cluster?
Is that for me?
Yes, this is for you, Minister.
One of our key agendas as a government is thinking about how we on purpose create networks and clusters that can enable entrepreneurs and innovators to be successful. So when we look at those successful examples, we see the confluence of success that comes through universities, through research centers, through firms making research and development, large firms in many cases, and the ecosystem that builds around that for smaller firms that might come and start up to support those firms, as well as to feed off the talent that comes in those places. So when we look at Kitchener-Waterloo, and there's other examples, we see University of Waterloo with a very innovative educational approach where there's co-op education that goes on. We see firms that have made significant investments there like OpenText and BlackBerry. We see the Perimeter Institute that focuses on basic research that brings talent to the region. So what we're looking to do on purpose is think about those places where we can have success in Canada, building out networks and clusters where we can have real expertise, whether it's in the clean energy sector in Calgary or the agricultural sector in other parts of the country, or, as I said, in the digital sector in a place like Kitchener-Waterloo. That's an idea that we're going to focus on as a government, and that's really a key part of our innovation agenda, which we'll be talking to Canadians more about in the coming months.
That's very interesting. I think there's a huge consensus of what are the challenges and the issues we're facing. Now, what can we learn from others? And so often that helps us kind of move forward. And mostly in innovation, there's a lot of risk to take. So as much as we want to be less risk averse, there's still some knowledge you need to have. And I know all of you have had experience, a lot of experience. And Jeff, I will start with you. You're running a multinational. What kind of advice could you give to the government with your experience?
I think the government really needs to, well, let me tell you a story. I was at an Actus yesterday, the startup awards, kind of more social startup awards, and the two finalists, the projects that they were working on was helping provide fresh produce to northern countries. And both organizations had embraced local government to help them bring this idea to market. The government played a role of how do we cut through the red tape? How do we connect within industry, give a little bit of funding, thoughtful funding, and then get the heck out of the way? And I think in many ways, that's what the government needs to do, those kind of three core principles.
And Brenda, from your viewpoint, what are the best models? What are the best examples we can take, and how can the municipalities at their level, what can they do?
Well, in the Kitchener-Waterloo area, we've been working hand in hand with all levels of government in creating a very innovative, collaborative community. And we work together for the benefit of all the companies involved. We engage with our universities, with Communitech, the Accelerator Center. And what's so important is that the municipal governments are supported by all levels of government to provide this grassroots support. We don't have the funding to provide money for the startups and for the infrastructure that's needed in buildings. What we do need is to set up a community that has those opportunities available for everyone. So we need all partners at the table, and municipal government is really strapped for cash. So any type of government funding that's available, grants that are given to us, that we can bolster up our economic development departments, go on trade missions with all levels of government and promote our communities. It's really critical to be talking at the grassroots levels with municipal government about what is needed in their communities. And we need to be at the table with all those discussions.
Thank you. And Tony, what would be your advice on how to build a culture within
Well, I've been an entrepreneur my whole career, and started in 1998, and I've started a number of companies. I've made many thousands of mistakes over my career. I've had many failures. I've started businesses that went nowhere. And in Canada, it's not really okay to have these kinds of failures. And that is a fundamental thing we have to change. The reality is that failure is part of the entrepreneurial process. I certainly, as I say, started with not a lot of track record, not a lot of experience, no experience, and no capital, and built it from the ground up. And the reality is that when you're doing that, you make a lot of mistakes. And you're going to have businesses that you start up that don't make it. And it's got to become okay in our VC community, across leadership in our communities, in our government, and our business leaders. It's got to become okay. It's got to become embraced, in fact, that this is part of the entrepreneurial process, part of the innovation process.
That's a good point. And the thing is, do you feel that we don't allow people to fail, that it's not accepted? It's not just that people are afraid to fail, but it's also that the community at large are not allowing it to happen.
Well, I wasn't able to...
Not that it's something that you want, but...
I mean, I wasn't able to raise any capital to start Wind Mobile in Canada. Mm-hmm. And it was, I went to every door that I could think of in the Canadian investment community, and I was not able to raise any capital here. And it was because I was told, and I already had a 10-year track record of building businesses at that mm-hmm. point. And I was told basically that there is no way that you will be successful. It's just, there's no chance. So there's just isn't the appetite for risk. And when you fail, you're going to have thrown away your great 10-year track record. So forget it. I really think our investment community, supported by government, really needs to be rethinking how we look at entrepreneurs and how we look at starting businesses up.
Interesting. So, Minister, a lot of people agree with you, obviously, but that's a very, very good point. So,
I just want to say that
please,
when we get off stage, I'm going to embrace Tony, and it's definitely okay. But I'm not going to embrace him with the cameras here and stuff. You know, that's, you know.
It's okay. Don't be shy. Okay, it's not a big risk. So, Minister, it is a very important point that Victoria made earlier when she introduced the program and talked about the importance of this meeting today and the discussion on innovation. Is that there's a lot of rhetoric about the high growth firms or high tech. It's almost elitist for a lot of when we talk about innovation, it's not just about them. It's about everybody in the room, but also every ideas that we need to kind of like encourage and if you want to build something solid. So how are you going to engage? How are you going to make sure while you're helping the high tech and you're helping or that we all are favoring the high growth firms? How are you going to engage the others? How are you going to make it broader? How do you make sure we all speak the same language and that there is that people feel concerned and included in the decision making?
Well, I guess I'd start by saying that we absolutely recognize that the only way we can get to having the right ideas pushing us forward is by engaging. So one of the very first efforts that I'm doing in my role is I've appointed an advisory council on economic growth. And so that was intended to bring voices from outside government into government to help us to identify how we can focus our efforts, to identify the places, the sectors, and how we get there. So that's critically important. We did it by focusing on attracting people that had broad experience. So we started, and the chair of the committee is Dominic Barton, who's the global CEO for McKinsey & Company, who's been in Korea, in China, and now is in the UK. We invited a couple of key leaders from Silicon Valley, so 2 women from Silicon Valley who are in the private equity world. We invited an entrepreneur from BC who she's had varied experience in building businesses. We invited an Aboriginal woman from BC who's started up businesses and with a lot of experience, as well as people from established firms like Brian Ferguson from Cenovus in Calgary and Elise Allen, who's the CEO of GE Canada. So we're trying to get a broad range of voices. We're trying to listen to people like the people in this room today, because we'll want to hear back from your report, in order to make sure that we focus on areas where we can have the greatest possible impact. We know that with the money that we're putting aside for innovation, if we slice it 1,000 ways, it won't have as much impact if we slice it 6 ways. And that's what we're intending to do, to figure out how we can have the biggest impact by thinking about not only students and basic research, but how we create the acceleration of collaboration between researchers, small firms, large firms, and universities. That's our goal, and we're working on it.
Big challenge. Now, if I want, because the time is running out, I'd love to hear from each of the panelists, what is the one recommendation you'd like to see in the strategy, the innovation strategy? Brenda, I will start with you.
Yes, that entrepreneurs and startups are part of the discussion. We're at the table, and we help lead the charge in creating an innovation policy, an innovation nation. And every one of us in this room today are entrepreneurs, and we're working hard to build a great Canadian economy that cares for everyone. So we want to be at the table and be part of those discussions.
Jeff?
I think there's I'd really love to see the government lean in harder on financial management skills and financial literacy. The number one reason we hear small businesses fail is they can't manage cash flow, they can't manage their core business fundamentals. And so there's a good step with the Financial Literacy Committee, with Jane Rooney, lean in more, in particular around educating small businesses how to be successful.
Tony?
I think we have to start investing heavily in high-growth businesses, high-growth industries, versus mature or declining or even obsolete industries. And this is really going to start the diversification of our economy that's so obviously critical to our long-term prosperity. So I really think the government should focus on how do we move resources, move investment, move intellectual capital into high-growth industries.
Okay, a lot on your plate then. But before, again, one last question, and I'd like this answer to be for the people in the room. So what would be the call of action for the entrepreneurs, the people who actually do have ideas? What do you recommend they do? Tony, go for it. And I will end with you.
You're really putting them on the hot seat here.
No.
Well, now that you got me started. Look, I think I would sort of revisit the idea that our leaders really have to make it acceptable to fail, to embrace the entrepreneurial process and really make it part of the innovation agenda, that we tell Canadians that, look, everywhere in the world, people start up businesses and they always start up with problems, and there are tons of failures, far more failures than successes. But that's the process that leads to the really big successes that are really going to create long-term prosperity for Canada.
Good. And Jeff, Intuit is one of the leader in terms of Canadian innovation. What is your call to action to this group here?
For entrepreneurs, I think it is think big. Start by thinking big, and then surround yourself with people that can help you realize that vision, that also have that grander scale mindset. People like Tony.
Brenda?
Yeah, be bold, take risks, and know that if you fail, you're just one step closer to being successful.
And Minister Morneau, the last word is for you. What is your call to action to this group here today? I know you've mentioned some, but more specifically.
We're going to work together with people like you on the ecosystem, on the foundation of our economy, the ways that we can work together to build from. So for the people in this room, you've already decided. You've come here. You're the people who are the potential creators for tomorrow. So I think the government's job is to encourage you, is to say that you absolutely need to go for it. We're going to try and create the opportunity to help you through, whether it's through institutions like the Business Development Bank of Canada or the Export Development Corporation, to make sure that we can help accelerate your success. But there's absolutely no substitute for entrepreneurial action. If we're going to be successful, it's going to be because of you. And so all I can really do is encourage you. And I can encourage you as well to think big. We have an important market in Canada. It's a market that we need to focus on. But we are thinking about how we open markets around the world on all of our behalf, but on your behalf, so that you can take your business from small to big and successful over a relatively short time period. So my encouragement, like the other people on this stage, is to think big and get on with it.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you, all the panelists. We're looking forward for a year from now, to see how much we have advanced in this project. Thank you very much. Thank you all.